Thank you so much to everyone joining. Great to see some familiar faces as well. And yeah, really excited to get into this topic. So for those who joined the second part of the series last week, where I spoke to Jacqueline, our head of North America, we're essentially doing a bit of a series here, really unpacking what brand advocacy is, the value of it in terms of how it supports marketing teams and the growth of the brand. And so we've done those first two sessions. We've got those recordings. So if anyone is looking to get hold of those, please do let us know. Be more than happy to share them afterwards. I think we'll be doing a little bit of a series recap after our session with Ollie today anyway. So if for whatever reason you miss out on that info, you can get in touch with either myself at alex@jewel.tech or Ollie, who's Ollie@jewel.tech, unsurprisingly, nice and easy. So I'll let Ollie introduce himself first. Ollie, tell us what you do at Jewel.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm the head of commercial here at Jewel. So my role really involves working end to end with various clients that we have across our brand advocacy programs. So essentially what I do is I look at the return on investment, I look at the objectives set out for the programs and help the advocacy team, the strategists to actually scope out, build and execute on those programs to make sure that we're providing a really strong return on investment for our clients, helping them to reduce costs, increase lifetime value, average order value, etc., etc. So I sit across a lot of things end to end. My entire career has been spent working for brands or consulting to brands, and I've been with Jewel for over 6 months now, which has gone very quickly.
It has. So there's going to be a whole bunch of acronyms you're going to be throwing at us, but also hopefully some useful takeaways that brands can use when it comes to really calculating the impact on the bottom line that advocacy is having. I think we touched on it briefly before, but this time we're really going to dig into brand advocacy and the return on investment that you can get through that. So in terms of kicking things off, really interested to know from yourself essentially where you feel that brand advocacy really supports the growth of a brand, whether it be the way that they're acquiring brands or lifetime value, like we mentioned before. It would be really interesting to see how, when it comes to acquisition, the impact of advocacy and, how brands can use it to their advantage, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we look at customer acquisition to start with, it's a very challenging topic and it's a very challenging area for a number of brands these days. Yes, there are an infinite amount more channels now than compared to the sort of the pre-digital, pre-internet age, but that also has brought along a lot of competition along the way as well. And we're seeing unbelievable acquisition cost increases from channels that brands have really heavily relied on for the last 10, 15 years, particularly social channels. And we're seeing increases of 2, 3, 4x acquisition for those brands to acquire new customers from their platforms, through those platforms. Now, there's a number of reasons why that's happening. Firstly, more and more brands are entering the market. It's far easier now to set up a business than it was, say, 25 years ago in terms of being able to spin up a brand and quickly start selling goods or services. It's not just brick and mortar anymore, of course. So we're seeing an increased level of competition within all major consumer brand markets. So what that's meaning is there's more and more pressure and more and more activity within the marketing space that's geared towards acquisition. Like I say, particularly across those channels. We can talk about anything. We can talk about adverts on the bus that drive past you in the street, the stuff that you see on TV when you pick up a newspaper, all that sort of stuff. But if we think of digital acquisition channels, particularly Facebook and Instagram over the last 10, 15 years, the cost has skyrocketed and the engagement has dropped off a cliff for a number of those reasons. So, as a consumer, we are on average subjected to between 6,000 and 8,000 adverts every single day, which is an incredible amount, right? That's a lot. And yes, we're all glued to our phones, we're all glued to screens, but we're being pushed with messaging constantly. We are constantly having advertising put into our faces to try and acquire us as a customer. And it's all just been very, very noisy, right? I've recently been looking at jeans to buy, and now my Instagram ad feed is just jeans, like constantly, because that's what I've been searching on my phone over the last few weeks, right? All these brands are paying to have an impression on me on my phone. Yet I am so numb to it. Because I'm receiving 6,000, 8,000 adverts a day, I'm numb to it, and I'm skipping through those sponsored posts all the time. And what it's doing is it's actually putting me a bit off the brand as a consumer. But really, the key thing here when we think about the return on investment is a lot of money is being spent to grab my attention, and it's just not happening. And more brands are fighting for the same space, which is why it's starting to cost a lot more money. So from an acquisition perspective, if you're timesing that 2-3 times, if your CAC is going up by that much, you're eating so much into your margin that you're probably making a loss on that customer for their first 2, maybe 3, sometimes 5 transactions before you're actually starting to see a return on your investment. Now, for a lot of brands, that's extremely difficult to get people to repeat purchase that many times. It's very rare that I see it where brands can say, yeah, this person will shop with us 6 times in 18 months to be able to actually get that positive return on their investment that they've made to acquire that customer. And that's just acquisition, right? What about retaining that customer to actually get them to purchase with you 6 times? That's half the battle, is winning that customer. But then obviously then retaining that customer is even more difficult, because instead of 1 transaction, it's 6. And this is where so many things come in to play that are perhaps outside your control. That could be things like shipping, having a poor experience. It could be low stock availability. The world is struggling to fulfill its orders right now. We've got shortages and issues all across the world. If I don't get my jeans in 6 to 8 weeks' time, I'm very unlikely to go back to that brand. And those are things that are outside of their control. And there's fulfillment, there's operations, there's customer service, you name it. There are so many more functions in the business that are then reliant on retaining that customer that it's extremely difficult.
So you're talking about things that are, in a brand's control or not in a brand's control. And you started off on the acquisition part. Maybe if we focus a little bit on that primarily, or at least first. You mentioned, increasing competition online. A brand can't change that. A brand can't force people to not shift online. A brand can't force other brands to not recognize that change in customer behavior, and more people, using the internet to search, purchasing through, e-commerce sites. What are some of the things around that acquisition piece that are in a brand's control that they do have the ability to change for the better and improve?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And unfortunately, most of them require big budgets to be able to do so, right? So, you can look at it from firstly a creative perspective. So I used to work in the creative industries, and it's absolutely proven that that creativity and investing in production of adverts and high quality, bold, creative adverts provide you a far better return on investment. So in terms of standing out from the noise, you can obviously create something that's beautiful from a production standpoint and something that's genius. You're going to be paying an agency a lot of money to come up with that idea. You're going to be paying a production agency a lot of money to make it. And then you're going to be paying a media agency possibly even more to go and push it out. So that can be really restrictive for brands, particularly SME brands, those that are under the sort of 200 million revenue per year. They don't have the budgets to be able to actually go and do that. So that's very, very difficult. The second one I touched on there is ad spend, and that's the same thing as well. You can continue to pump money into this acquisition channel, but it's quite a big risk again, because the level of investment that you need to make to actually stand out from the crowd in terms of how many impressions you're going to make on me compared to your competitor brands, means that you're going to have to invest a lot of money in that. And again, for most businesses, that's just too big a risk to take. It can be really great for brand awareness, but in terms of actually then cutting through the noise and converting to customers, I've got to have everything else as well, right? So I've got to have great creative, and I've got to have a great product, and I've got to have a great website that's seamless from an e-commerce perspective. But again, the investment is so vast and enormous that it's a huge risk for a number of brands. And we've seen a lot of brands in the last few years, particularly e-commerce brands that have scaled aggressively because of the impacts of COVID, are now really starting to struggle. And we're seeing a lot of layoffs because the investment that they made to grow so quickly was fantastic, but now their net asset position is not so great, and their risk profile is enormous. And that's why we're seeing a lot of people sadly losing jobs or major cutbacks, price increases, whatever it might be. Something that I believe, and well, the numbers prove it as well, is a disingenuous way of promoting your brand is through using celebrity influencers. Now, this is a market and industry that was really born only a few years ago. Well, really, it's been around forever. Gary Lineker has always been an influencer for Walker's Crisps and George Clooney for Nespresso. But in terms of actually digitizing that and looking at the digital influencers, it's something that started off went crazy and was excellent, and brands that did it really well have succeeded really well, agencies as well. However, a recent YouGov study shows that 96% of people do not trust influencers, which is a staggering number. And I think the reason is that it's gotten so out of control with, if you're an influencer, Alex, and, you probably could be, 1 week you're repping one brand with a highly beautifully produced piece of content with some copy that's not in your tone of voice, it's in the brand's tone of voice, and hashtag ad at the end. People are very aware of this now, because the next week you're probably repping a competitor brand, and you're doing the same the week after and the week after, and you're promoting products that aren't relevant to what you are as that influencer. If you are a football player and you're repping football boots, that makes sense, right? However, if you're repping something that you're not an expert on and you're not an authority on, it doesn't make sense, because you're advocating about something that you don't actually know too much about. So again, this can be very, very beneficial for brand awareness, but when there's, when 24 out of 25 people don't trust the message that they see from an influencer, the risk, again, of working with influencers is enormous. A client we're working with have recently been quoted £28,000 for a 10-second Instagram story from someone with 2.5 million followers. And this person's not even linked to the industry in which our client works in. That's a huge investment that our client can't afford to risk, particularly if 24 out of 25 of those people don't trust it. So again, it can be really good for brand awareness, but you need huge amounts of budget, and you need to work with the right influencers. A lot of brands see a follower number and they think that that's the way to go. That person's got 7 million followers, fantastic. Well, what they don't think about is the lack of trust, but also the engagement. So if you look at Instagram followers, if you've got over 1 million followers, I think it's on average 1.4% engagement, which is incredibly low. So you're paying to be seen by 1 million people, and you are not being seen by anywhere near 1 million people. It's in the thousands instead. So again, is that the most effective and sensible use of your money? I personally don't believe so. In terms of, the best way to do this, and to be honest with you, one of the main reasons that really attracted me to what Joel is trying to do is this sort of idea of word of mouth advocacy. Now, every brand in the world has advocates for it. And what I say by that is someone who is going out there and talking about their brand in a positive way to their friends, their family, their colleagues, whoever it may be. Everyone has got advocates, otherwise they wouldn't be in business, okay? Word of mouth advertising is by far and away the strongest and most powerful conversion way of converting new customers, right? I tell you to go to a restaurant, you're way more likely to go because I've told you than because you've read about it in the paper. But that restaurant has absolutely no idea that I advocated for you. They don't know who told you to go there, why you went there, what you were told, how you were told it, or who the person is that told you, so that they can then engage with that advocate and actually use that advocate more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think in terms of understanding that word of mouth then, where are those sources that they're going to tap into? Because you said, looking at somebody with follow account, that being the way that historically brands might have approached this situation. Where do you start looking if you're trying to do the opposite to that? Where are you starting to look if you are trying to identify people who are far more of a trustworthy source to the end consumer, where it's not going to be 24 out of 25 people don't trust their message, but hopefully a much lower number?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what you've got to think about is people that advocate for brands in your life as an individual, right? I was looking for a plumber the other week. Did I go online? No. I texted a few friends and said, does anyone know a good plumber? And yes, they knew a good plumber. I trust and respect my friend enough to understand that. And I rang the bloke up and he came the next day, and I didn't need to use Instagram or whatever it is to find one. I think the interesting thing is you think about the quality of word of mouth, but the issue that a lot of brands have, particularly in the SME space, is actually volumizing that advocacy, right? They know that they are providing a great product or service, customer service to their customers. Their customers enjoy what they do. They're interacting with them on social platforms. They're doing whatever they might be doing to interact with that brand. But it's then a case of, okay, who are these people and how can we use them as a brand ourselves to elevate our message, help us acquire new customers and retain existing ones as well? So it's a really interesting place to be in, because where there is relativity to the industry in which you operate, the trust factor is going to be a lot higher, right? So I follow a lot of chefs on Instagram. If one of them says, well, these jeans are great, okay, I might be interested in what they've got to say. But if they tell me that these knives are great, I'm going to be far more interested in listening to them, because they are an expert in their field. I respect and value their insights and their opinions enough to follow them on Instagram and engage with them on a regular basis, to like their posts, to watch their stories, to read their tweets, watch their YouTube tutorials, whatever it might be. I have a relationship with this person. It's a one-way relationship. They don't know who I am, the chef themselves, but I have such a high trust in what they say and do, because they have proven through the quality of their content and their reputation over a period of time that I can trust that person like a friend when I'm looking to be referred to a product or a service. So, am I going to give them keys to my house? No, but I'm certainly going to listen to them when they tell me a restaurant or a product, a kitchen product is great. I'm going to listen to them. Their engagement stats are way higher than influencers over 1 million. They're about 3 or 4 times higher. And their conversion rates are therefore a lot stronger, because 24 out of 25 people will trust that chef that's engaging with that content, as opposed to the complete opposite of someone who is just an influencer.
But if we are talking about, I appreciate that, but if 1% of someone that has 1 million followers is still going to be much better in terms of absolute numbers than 3 or 4% of someone who has 10,000 followers. If we were to try and kind of keep the numbers simple, using 1 million versus 10,000, 1% of 1 million versus 3 or 4% of 10,000, you'd still put your money behind that person with 1 million followers, right? Because ultimately they're still going to drive you more engaged followers to your message. So when you're comparing 1 to 1, it feels like the numbers don't add up.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and they don't at 1 to 1. But again, this is going back to my point earlier about ensuring you're working with the right influencers as well, right? like I say, I don't care about a chef talking about jeans. I don't care about David Beckham talking about a knife. It's got to be relative, because even if it is seen by that 1%, those 10,000 people, what if those 10,000 people are not interested in what is being promoted? It doesn't matter then, does it? Why do I care? Why do I, if I see, I don't use like women's makeup, right? I don't use makeup. So why, if I'm one of the 10,000 people that see someone who was on Love Island promoting makeup, what's the point? What am I going to do with that information? Nothing. Okay. But I appreciate on a one-to-one level, it doesn't work. Now, this is where word of mouth, I guess, has become digitized over a period of time, where instead of, having a few advocates that are doing things for you, when you've built your brand to a certain level and a certain size, well, even from a small level, really, you are going to have multiple advocates that are there, that are ready to start, I guess, being energized to advocate for your brand on a slightly more formal basis. Now, I speak to a lot of brands that have got about 30 or 40 sort of ambassadors, advocates working with them, who are providing more value than their previous influencer marketing campaign. And that's just 30 or 40 of them, because you're getting 30 or 40 people with, say, an average of 5,000 followers each, speaking to, yes, probably still about the same number of people as that one influencer, but the engagement and the interest is skyrocketed as a result, right? So if we lose makeup as an example, what if it's 30 to 40 to 50 makeup artists with 5,000 followers that all have a high trust following, right? Mm-hmm. So even though you might get the same number of people actually viewing the content, the people engaging with it, it's going to be astronomically better as a result. And therefore, you're then going to get more clicks through to your website, and you're going to acquire new customers, and they're going to continue to advocate for you. So the customer is going to continue to see the content, which helps to retain that customer, increase LTV. They say, Mentionly did some really interesting research recently that a referred customer is worth twice, on average, a standard new customer through LTV.
So they might be worth more in the longer term, but just thinking back to your original comment when you were talking about customer acquisition costs, if I've got to lump my money behind one, let's call them super influencer, for example, that has, crazy number of followers, like 1 million, then if brands are working with 30, 40, 50 of those more micro influencers, for example, then isn't that just going to multiply their cost by 30, 40 or 50 times, because they're just having to do that to more people?
Well, I mean, it wouldn't multiply that much, but it can become quite resource intense. It can become quite heavy. From a manual perspective, you are, constantly humanly engaging with these people. You're fulfilling gifting, you're chasing them, you're ratifying numbers. It sounds like hell to me personally. So yeah, absolutely, you can do that. But there are a number of much smarter ways of doing that through platforms. So there's different things, and it depends on the objectives that you have. If you're looking for just acquiring new customers, perhaps a really strong affiliate program would be really suitable for you. And you can make that really simple through technology and automate that process. So what it allows you to do is, firstly, your cost base doesn't increase 30, 40 times. It doesn't multiply. Obviously, economies of scale are applied through a huge amount of automation. And then you can start to scale that program and move it into the hundreds or potentially thousands, depending on the size of your brand. And when you think about customer acquisition costs as well, you think about your internal resources, right? If you've got one resource who's spent, who you're paying a salary and a pension and all the other costs that are running that business, if they're spending their entire time working with 25, 30, 40 ambassadors, you need to get some significant value from that to be able to make that investment that you're making as a business worthwhile. And it absolutely can be done. And there's numerous examples of it working really well. But if you really want to exercise that, then you need to dive in further into your customer base, into your social following, people that are fans of your brand. People that are there ready and waiting, they're probably already advocating for you. You just don't know that they're doing it.
So you mentioned examples, and you also mentioned gifting just then as well. I'm interested to dive a little bit more into the gifting. This is the economics of brand advocacy. So it'd be really interesting to explore the impact that gifting has on a brand, because I think one of the things that I certainly hear in the conversations that I have is that the idea of having to gift a lot more than one person, for example, having to gift 30, 40, 50, 100, 1,000 people, that feels like an enormous cost for a brand to need to take on. Where does a brand get its return on investment through the medium of gifting, for example? Because I know you mentioned some others, but if we kind of simplify it and start there, where's the return on investment for gifting for a brand?
No, absolutely. It's a really good question, because it can seem like a big outlay when you're obviously working with a large pool of ambassadors. I think what's really important to remember is that typically D2C e-commerce brands will have a pretty healthy margin on their products. So what that means is they are able to gift at a far higher value than it is to the cost to them as a business. Now, think of the impact that has on the ambassadors themselves. They are receiving more of a product that they love, a product that they are a company that they're advocating for, a brand that they love. So what they are then doing is if they're getting a little bit more, let's say, than what they might buy, they're going to be talking about that extensively, right? They're going to be spending time and effort to create really beautiful content. So let's start with content, right? So you're making fantastic content that the brands can use and repurpose there. So they can save a lot of money on their own production costs by using user-generated content from these people who, like I say, are content creators. They know what they're doing. So firstly, they're doing that. Then you've got to think of earned media value as well. The amount of eyes that are being seen talking about that product, huge, incredible amount of value there. And then also you've got to think about customer acquisition as well, because the higher the quality of the content, the more engaging it is for the followers, the more likely people are to click through on that link and to go on and purchase a product from you. And like I say, retain the business, like I said earlier. So what you're really doing is you're focusing all of your efforts on your specific target audience, and then you're getting a return on investment through that. Now, if you compare that to paying someone £28,000 for a 10-second Instagram story that will disappear in 24 hours, you could probably gift, a standard brand could probably gift close to 1,000 ambassadors for that same amount of money, about £80 to £100 worth value of product. 80 to 100 people with 5,000 followers each, with 6% engagement. But that engagement is also people that trust them, people that interact with them on a regular basis, and they follow them because of their expertise. So therefore, their impression to the brand is way more valuable as a result. Mm-hmm. It's pretty obvious to me.
Earned media value, what you just shared there, is something that's often used as not certainly not an excuse, but almost a reason for marketers to test any number of channels that more often than not are actually ones that are quite hard to track. So it's used in TV, used a lot on social, for example. If we're talking about brand advocacy and the economics of brand advocacy, where do you see earned media value kind of fitting into this? Is it a case of the fact that, so I guess the kind of the easiest place to start is obviously defining what we mean by earned media value, and then I guess comparing it when we're talking about ambassadors versus talking about, say, a traditional influencer, for example.
Yeah, sure. So, earned media value is typically calculated as the number of impressions times the cost of 1,000 impressions times an adjustable variable. Now, if we think about, the value of those impressions and the cost now of using social media advertising, for example, to generate that, you're looking at about $38 to be seen by 1,000 people on Instagram.
Which just in the right audience. I mean, that feels like a hell of a lot of money.
That's an incredible amount of money, right? So if you think of it from the perspective of the earned media side, where you've got a pool of hundreds, well, it could be 20, could be thousands of ambassadors that are actually they're actually creating this content for you for free, essentially, or for a very low cost to you as a business, very low cost to you, who are then, and then you're able to repurpose and reshare that yourself. It's that sort of multiple effect, right? You can start to feature that on other social platforms. You could be resharing TikTok content on your Instagram page. Mm-hmm. And so what you're actually able to do is to take that piece of media and just completely exacerbate the value of it through resharing, through reposting, through all the eyes that are seeing it. And like I say, they are the engaged people. They are the people that are following. I don't follow any makeup artists on Instagram because it's not relevant to me. I follow chefs. I follow cricketers, things that I'm interested in. So you're only going to be seen by the people that are relevant.
And so you said, so it's the cost per impression, which we're talking is already significantly lower because you're not using a platform like Facebook or Instagram. You're actually using your gifting budget at a margin that suits the brand in order to then multiply that out to a certain number of eyeballs, which are also eyeballs that are more trusted, I suppose. I guess that's where I'm interested in that variable. So what we're kind of multiplying that by, and it seems like based on what you shared before, that engagement really is the main variable here for brands, and that actually the engagement of an influencer is someone that is going to be much lower than the engagement of a true brand ambassador or a true advocate of the brand. That, it sounds like what you're saying is that's where the real opportunity is, the earned media value of ambassadors being significantly more, because one of those multipliers is actually engagement versus super influencer, if you like, the mega influencer.
100%. It's 4 or 5 times. If you look at the average engagement, if you've got 5,000 followers, I think sits at about 6.4% off the top of my head. Whereas if you've got 1 million, it's 1.4%. So it's enormous, and it's difficult to actually quantify exactly what that means, because again, it's whether it's the right set of eyes, right? Mm-hmm. But and it's very obvious if you look through the follower list of a makeup artist with 5,000 followers, I would say that a very high percentage of them would be the target market audience for the brands that they are advocating for. Yeah. If you were to look at the follower list of someone who was on a reality TV show and you're promoting makeup, the percentage of people that have got any interest in that product is going to be much, much lower. And then the engagement is 4 or 5 times less on top of that as well. So it's a double whammy. It's basically, it's relevance and then it's engagement with the content itself. So that's where the value from working with these experts, these content creators, these people that are passionate about your brand really shines through. And the great thing is any brand out there has got a big pool of these advocates and these ambassadors. They probably just don't know who they are, and they're probably just not engaging with them strongly enough at the moment to see that massive return on investment that brands that do work with thousands of ambassadors and advocates do see.
I feel like that kind of almost brings us nicely back full circle to the first topic that I believe Lisa and Jacqueline were speaking about as well. You've taken us through today the difference in engagement with different types of levels of influencer, if you like, where the opportunities for return come from in terms of being the right audience, the right impressions, the right engagement rate. You fill this in on gifting and, you know, the difference in margin, particularly for an e-commerce brand versus outright paying someone 28 grand for a story, which does make me think that I'm completely in the wrong job here. We'll circulate this recording internally, see what it does to the salaries. But so you finally, it would be worth just kind of picking your brain then. You've had this conversation with brands before. The end result, I think, which is really always difficult, is okay, I understand the economics, I understand the sort of basic formula, more of this, less of that equals this result. How do I go about making a case for this internally within my business? You know, you might have convinced me as the marketer. When it comes to investing in this long term for a brand, how do you guide people in terms of having that conversation? What are the sorts of things that they should be taking back to their leadership team, to their board, to their founder? How do you package up this investment in brand advocacy to them?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. And I think it's such a wide-ranging number of benefits, but I think, you know, the key one at the moment, you know, we're coming into a recession, right? You know, it's already happening. Customer acquisition costs are increasing. Customer spend is starting to reduce, and customer loyalty will reduce further as price becomes a far more leading indicator of choice, right? So brands need to be investing in obviously acquiring those customers, but retaining them as well. And that retention piece is going to become more and more and more important for brands. As you know, it's always important, but it's going to become more important as we move into this impending doom period. I think the key thing here is really about building your brand, building your identity, and building your community. And what I mean by that is almost all brands out there in the world will do some form of advertising. And what that is a brand advocating for themselves. That is a brand telling you how good they are, how great their products are, how good their service is. That's all well and good. However, do I trust a brand? Not really. No, a brand can build trust with me over the long term, but how do I build that initial trust? For me, it's word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is the key thing at the heart of everything. The trust is built through word of mouth. So you use these ambassadors to help you acquire the customers, but then what you're doing then is by investing in the ambassadors, you're actually going back and completing it full circle. You're creating new customers who become fans of your brand, who then become advocates and bring you those new customers. So we could talk about closing the loop a lot in terms of customer acquisition and retention. But sorry, a bit of a long story, but the way that we've got to think about it from a brand community and a brand building stage is you're building an identity where other people are telling you that they think that you're great as a brand. Mm-hmm. That is the key element of all of advocacy and everything that puts it together. And to go back and sell that into the business, you can show them that your customer acquisition costs can come down. You can stop relying on one company called Meta for all of your customer acquisition, which is a scary thing to be doing. To be reliant on, you know, a significant amount of your business through one vehicle is dangerous. That's high risk. You can stop putting money in Zuckerberg's pocket as well. That's always handy. But you're diversifying your approach and you're building for the long term. And brands that take a short-term view get short-term results. Brands that take a long-term view get long-term results. And that's what brands need to be doing to grow and scale organically and naturally so that they can become recession-proof and so they can come out flying post it when some of their competitors will not.
I really think the point around, you know, trusting an individual as opposed to trusting a company. A brand is something that we hope that we build, but ultimately it's an entity, and actually it's the people that surround it. That's who you grow familiarity with. That's who you end up trusting inherently, and therefore trying to buy in that, trying to fake the individual's love for a brand ultimately fakes the trust that it generates as a result. So
100%.
really,
100%. Even just one final thing to add, if you think of like a big behemoth company like your gas supplier, right? If you ring them up and you get phenomenal customer service on the phone, you won't leave, because your brand is being built by the individual. If you get terrible customer service, your contract's coming up in 2 months' time, you'll go. Even if something's a little bit more money per month, you will go, because your brand is poor because of the experience that customer has had. So just think about that. Next time you're talking to someone about your phone contract renewal or something, if someone's brilliant and provides excellent service and builds the brand, and then takes it away from being a corporate entity to being a human being, you will trust that brand way more than you did before that phone call.
Although I'm not entirely sure how energy companies are going to be able to charge us any more going forward. But I still I get the point. Ollie, I really appreciate you running us through that. I know there's a lot of numbers being kind of thrown out there. What I'd really like to do is just make sure we've got at least a couple of minutes to answer some of the questions that have come through. I think we've got one from Paul, who says, where do we draw the line between celebs, influencers, creators, advocates, ambassadors? And I'm conscious that even in this talk, we've been using that terminology a lot and interchangeably. And he says, or does it not matter? Like, what for you is the root of that definition that's actually meaningful to getting the results that you want to get?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. Thanks, Paul. The terminology in this space is still in its infancy, and what one person calls an advocate one place will call it something different elsewhere. I think, to simplify it, celebrities and influencers to me are influencers based on following. They are not people of influence. Now, what I mean by that is, they are great for brand awareness. They've got loads of followers. They'll get loads of likes, even if it's something that you don't care about. However, they're not people of influence. So what I mean by that is your creators, your ambassadors, which you might call like a micro influencer, say like 1 to 20,000 people. These are people of influence. People care what they have to say. People care about what they recommend, and people create the action of visiting that website and buying that product and becoming a customer of that brand. So I think that's what I would call the clear definition. An advocate is anyone that talks positively about your brand. Now, you don't want to pay me as a brand ambassador for my 500 Instagram followers. However, I might be advocating for your brand. Now, it's important to always engage your advocates. And we haven't even discussed customer loyalty and advocacy today, and that's another, we could do hours and hours on that. But everyone that speaks about your brand is an advocate. But people that are actually having, that could be on a one-to-one basis though, Alex. Like if you say, go to this restaurant, you're advocating, but you're not creating a significant impact on me. The people that are the creators, the ambassadors, those that sit in the sort of micro ambassador 1 to 20,000 space, those are people of influence.
Got it. Brilliant. Hope that was helpful, Paul. I think we've had a couple more coming through directly. So I think you mentioned LTV. Just to recap what LTV was very quickly, Ollie. So LTV is, you're referring to lifetime value here. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the retention element, again, as a brand, you will have a retention strategy. You will have your post-purchase flows, your CRM flows. You can do what every single brand in the world does, and that's send me a weekly newsletter that I never open. Or you can have people continuing to advocate for your business. Oh yeah, I did buy something from that brand and I did like it, but this person is still advocating for them, this ambassador that I trust. So it's gonna remind me to come back in. It's gonna remind me to come back in. Or you can actually run a really innovative and great customer advocacy program where you're going to engage with me in a way that isn't sending me 10% off on my birthday and a weekly newsletter. But if you can drive LTV every time you acquire a new customer, if your LTV is increasing, you're getting multiples, right? And that's going to have an enormous effect on your bottom line, like huge effect. If you're reducing your customer acquisition costs, increasing your average order value, but then increasing the number of customers you've got that are spending more, that's the recipe for success, really.
There we go. Solving the Recession by Ollie Smith. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe not quite that far, but
we don't want that to go on record, do we? That you're solely responsible for that.
No, definitely
not. Ollie, thank you so much for taking us through that. Really appreciate it. I think with a couple of the other questions, I'm just conscious of the time as we're coming up to nearly the hour mark, minus a couple of the technical blips that we had earlier. We can follow up. Ollie, if people want to reach out with you, where can they get in touch?
Yeah, so it's ollie@joule.tech. I'll just drop it in the chat now. Yeah, please do reach out if you've got any questions or need any advice on this. Yeah, myself or one of my team will be happy to help.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ollie. And yeah, that actually brings a close to our most recent 3-part series. So Jacqueline and Lisa discussing what brand advocacy is and the definition of it. Myself and Jacqueline last week discussing the value of brand advocacy for teams. And then obviously we've had Ollie today discussing the economics of brand advocacy. So we left a lot of the number crunching towards the tail end of it. We'll make sure to follow up with everyone who's attended. Thank you so much for the questions. Great to see the familiar faces that have been popping up for all of them. And like Ollie said, please do reach out to us if you've got any more follow-up questions or content that you'd love to see at the next event. We'd be really keen to make sure that we are answering a lot of the questions that our community has. So thanks, Ollie. Thanks to everyone who joined, and we'll see you very soon.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.